Welcome to the World of Eora, a news and lore podcast about Pillars of Eternity and Avowed. I'm your host, Eric, aka Gingerino. Thank you so much for joining me as we dive into the history, lore, and game mechanics for the worlds that Obsidian has created for us. Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of the World of Eora. I'm your host, Eric, aka Gingerino. Thanks everyone for joining me on another episode as we dive into the history, lore, and game mechanics for Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2 and Avowed. For anyone curious how those are all in the same boat, it's because they share the same fantasy world known as Eora. And the aim of this podcast is to just dive deep into the lore of this world that we know and love, learn a little bit more of the nuances of the writing, help to appreciate your playthroughs a little better, help create characters that are a little more compelling, use them on tabletop role-playing games, or whatever, just enjoying the lore of a world that are in games we know and love. If you're new to the show, welcome to the show. Very happy to have you here. If you have any questions or comments or anything that you would like to ask or say, just email me, worldofeora@gmail.com. Love having conversations about this stuff or games in general, RPGs in specific. And yeah, today's episode is going to be a pretty decent one to start off with. Not really a ton of spoilers to go over. This one is kind of an odd one, at least for me. Like, it's not a weird topic, it's just a weird one to talk about because there's not a lot of meat on the bones of this topic. But it was one that I was just kind of, when I was doing research for another topic, I kind of got on this little tangent and I thought, I don't know anything about this stuff, and so I want to talk about it today. And it's also difficult to talk about because I actually haven't done this part of the game, mostly because I suck at beating things in this game. I have to play on the easier difficulties to get through it. I do have a dream one day to play Path of the Damned mode on Pillars of Eternity 1 or 2, but at the current time of this recording, I still haven't been able to do that. I don't have the gameplay chops to make it through, you know. I'm sure I could do it. I'm sure I could sit down and figure it out. I just haven't. So anyways, the topic for today is everything surrounding the megabosses in the Deadfire game. Now, before anybody gets super excited that there is this like hidden well of knowledge and lore about each one of these megabosses from the Deadfire, I don't want to disappoint you, but there's not a ton about them, right? Like there is just not a ton of things we know, and unless the people who have played the mega bosses are gatekeeping some sort of like secret knowledge by not revealing it, as far as I can tell, there's not a lot of lore about the mega bosses specifically. But I am interested to just think about the implications of there being a Deadfire Visitors Preservation Society and what the idea of mythic Audra implies about the world, as well as the unique items that we get from each megaboss if you defeat them, what they kind of mean, or how they would work if they could exist at all in the world. So that is what I'm talking about today, and it's weird for me because I haven't beaten these bosses. I've gone to where they are. I've said, "Hey, how are you?" and then they thoroughly slaughtered me in 1 or 2 hits. But I have not actually beaten these bosses. And so the interest I have is purely from at a distance, and all of the lore I can learn about anything related to it is purely from reading and watching things online for people who are better at this game than I am by a long shot. So, well, maybe one day I'll beat one of them, but that day is not going to be today. As far as news goes, the only thing that is newsworthy is Pillars of Eternity has got its turn-based mode out, and I've talked about this in the last few episodes, but it's just something I keep reminding people in case you were not aware of the first place. Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2 are both real-time with pause-style games. That's how the combat works. It's not turn-based like in Baldur's Gate 3 or something like that. And so a lot of people were very excited about turn-based mode being out and released for those who like to play that way. There's a lot of reviews coming out for Pillars of Eternity all over again, specifically focusing on turn-based mode. And so if this is something that interests you, go and check that out. Play the game in turn-based mode. Otherwise, there's not really a ton of news, at least nothing that I have heard about. that's worth reporting on the show. And so we're just going to dive straight into the lore today.
Half the locals would arrest you for trespassing and the rest would kill you outright. I'm curious, what exactly did you find there?
So today's episode came from me exploring some stuff in the Deadfire and the items that were released in random packs and DLC for the game. I did an episode on the endings of Deadfire, and that's kind of how I ended up looking at the different DLC packs that came out, such as the Deck of Many Things or the Realm Runners pack. I was looking at the different types of food and drinks that were in the game and how, like, if you read between the lines, you can kind of see what the fantasy equivalent of certain things are. Like Merc Brew in this world is very clearly coffee. Palmstone is a coconut. Like there's these like Eoran equivalents to food and drink. And I was like, I want to do an episode on that. And I was kind of like unsure because it felt like I would just be saying literally what I just said. This item is this item in the real world. That's it. I don't know anything about that. And I was looking through the DLCs and I got to the part where they were releasing these megabosses. And I just stared longingly at these megabosses thinking, oh man, I would like to beat one of these things one day, but for now I'm not going to. And this happens to me every time I do look at them, as I think there must be something about, Belranga or Dorudagon or whatever it's called. There must be something about it that I can look into. And then I always find it's just a note from some society that says, don't go near these things because they'll friggin' kill you. And that's very much the case. At least it was for me. I die immediately as soon as I approach them. But there is some other things kind of surrounding these mega bosses that are kind of worth mentioning or even just thinking about if you're a person like me who likes to sit down and think about these implications of games. I'm very much a person who watches a content creator like Any Austin on YouTube, where I will sit and look at a thing and go, I wonder how that actually works in this game, or like what the implications of that are. I don't think I'm necessarily as far reaching as Any Austin in terms of like how far I actually go to do research. That man is a machine, highly respect him, and I think the content he puts out is great. But yeah, I don't think I have quite the chops or the time necessarily to do what he does in that regard. That being said, there's a lot of interesting things in this release that we can look at the surrounding things of and ask what the implications are. So let's dive into it one thing at a time. So first off, if you are wondering what the hell I'm even talking about in the first place, these mega bosses are endgame challenges that you can take on in the Deadfire. They are meant to be very difficult challenges. They are like the pinnacle of the combat challenges in the game. You should be a high-level party, and you need to know the mechanics inside and out. You have to have strategy. You're going to have to be patient. There's a whole bunch of things. And these were mega bosses that were just released by Obsidian for the sake of this game. And there were 4 mega bosses that came out. We have the Crystal Empress, the Voracious Mountain, the Sigil Master Aronic, and the Hellfire Colossus. Each one of those things are a mega boss, and they have their own unique name, and they have a little blurb about how and why you should avoid them that's set in the world of the game itself. It also introduces some interesting things as well, such as mythic weapons, armors, and shields. So in the game, there are different tiers. You have common tier, fine tier, etc., all the way to mythic tier weapons, armor, and shields. And the higher the quality of these items, then, the better they are. It's pretty standard video game logic at this point. And it introduces this mechanic by talking about something called a mythical Adra stone. And this was actually the first item that really got me thinking about what this could imply about the world, given what we already know, and why I wanted to start talking about this thing anyways. So, mythical Adra stone is technically classified as an ingredient in the game because you use it in crafting towards making your weapons and armor better. It is the only ingredient that you require to make things into mythic quality, and you can only get these mythical Adra stones by beating one of the mega bosses, or if you use one of the Bareth's blessings from the game creation. So you can, I think it happens after you beat a game, or if you've played enough of the game, you can, as you unlock achievements, you get these options to unlock blessings when you start a new game. You can make things easier for yourself, in that regard, such as starting a character at level 4. You can have a whole bunch of gold when you start off a game. That's what Bareth's blessings are. One of the blessings is you can get an armoire, which has one of these items in it, one of these mythic Audra stones. And so you can get one that way. So that would be the way that I'm going to get it, because there's no other possible way I can do it. But the other way is to have one drop by each one of these bosses. So you can have a total of 5 throughout your playthrough of the Deadfire, and use it to upgrade a set of armor and some weapons and other things like that. If you have 5, I guess you have enough that you could dedicate 1 mythical Audra stone to each character in your party, if you know what you like your party to be by the end of the game. So I guess that's one way to think about it. Anyways, the description when you read the mythical Audra stone in your inventory is, Audra of this density and vibrancy is said to reside in the cores of only the strongest, healthiest pillars. Extraction is a delicate and specialized task, but the result is a mineral packed with so much malleable essence that it can draw new properties out of already remarkable tools. So let's unpack that here. And this is touching on a lot of stuff that we have already talked about in the games for Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2 and Avowed, such as Audra and Essence and infusing magic into items. And so I'm going to try not to belabor it too much, but obviously I do have to mention it so we can understand how this works. So really quick, for those of you who are new here, maybe I should put some sort of like musical cue at this point, and so that way people know how far to skip. But regardless, this is what it is. So Audra is a unique mineral. It's a unique resource that exists within this world. Its major function within this world is that it can conduct soul energy, which is, the stuff that souls are made of, and it's called essence, right? So essence, the stuff souls are made of, can go in and through Audra. That's what makes Audra special. And there are, kind of different tiers of Audra in terms of like how much essence is packed into one chunk of Audra at a time. This particular Audra is mythical in terms of its quality, I guess you could say. This has got the most essence, at least that we see in these games, the most essence packed into one piece of a stone. Apparently, it's got high density, and it's even got high vibrancy, so I suppose this implies that Audra has a vibrancy to it. I don't know if that means you can hold it and it literally vibrates, or if it's just the vibrancy of the color. Because when we play in Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire, we see Luminous Audra, which is supposed to have more essence in it than normal Audra within the rest of the world, and it is a vibrant green tone. And so perhaps the vibrancy described here is more about the tone of the actual rock itself in terms of color, which would be interesting. I wonder, can a piece of Audra get so vibrantly green that it enters into like a spectrum of the green color that is like imperceivable by, humanoid eyes or something like that? Like, can it get so green that we can't see how green it actually is? I don't know. That doesn't actually mean anything, but it's just a weird thought that I have of like, could it be the most green thing humanly possible? It reminds me of this video I watched on YouTube recently about, I think it's called Musso Black, which is the most black color that can exist. Like, it's the most black thing that can exist. And you might think to yourself, how can something be more black than something else? Well, something is black when it absorbs more light. And so if you have something that is like Musso black, it absorbs like, 97% of all light that touches it. So it's not only is it the color of black, but that it actually is absorbing more light, and therefore it almost like creates darkness around it is what it looks like. It's crazy. But anyways, so I wonder if this mythical Audra stuff can be so green that you almost wouldn't even be able to see the defined edges of the thing. It would just be this green spot. But that's more fantasy than probably reality. I mean, not reality. It's probably more fantasy than this game is wanting to put forth. Regardless, we have... I'm so sorry. To those who have listened for a long time, you're probably like, what is going on with him today? So we have this healthy, dense and vibrant piece of Audra. It says that these reside in only the strongest, healthiest pillars, and this is referring to the giant pillars that we can see throughout the world of Audra that is naturally deposited worldwide and even theoretically interconnected within the planet itself. And so this is the healthiest, strongest portions of these pillars where we can find these Audra stones. And apparently taking them out is quite a delicate and specialized task. We're requiring some sort of specialized skill or methodology or technique. And I'm not sure what the problem is. Is it that it is very easily broken? Is it that it is very difficult to get that deep within the Audra pillar without some sort of cataclysm happening? Or is there something that can happen to your soul? Is this thing like so potent that your own soul could get sucked out of it? Or is it very easy to, like, I don't know, jiggle a mythical Audra stone and then essence will almost fall out of it because it's so densely packed? Like, what happens if you don't extract it properly, I guess, is the question I have, and it doesn't really say here. Now, either way, this is a mineral packed with so much malleable essence that it can draw new properties out of already remarkable tools. Malleable essence is kind of all it. Essence is the stuff, like I said, that souls are made of. It's spiritual energy. Not only does it exist in your soul within this world, but it also exists in all organic living things. And malleable essence is this idea that you can use essence to infuse onto things to make them more powerful or enchanted in some way, shape, or form. So whenever you have a unique weapon or armor that exists within these games and they have some sort of magical property, it's because there is essence infused into that object that is giving it that quality to be able to have that magical quality in the first place. The interesting thing here is that it says that it can draw new properties out of already remarkable tools. And I understand the gamified thing that it's trying to say is that, like, oh, it makes the stuff you have better. And, you know, from a game perspective, that makes sense. From a lore perspective, it's saying that it is enhancing the already existing thing there, that it is exaggerating the effect that is already there. So if you have, you know, a piece of weapon or armor that has an enchantment that, you know, like, makes it emit flames or something like that, this will make the flames more potent. How that works is very interesting because the essence that is infused in these items to, like, say, make it emit flames or have a trail of flames follow you wherever you go is very specific to the essence that was used. It might have something to do with the memory of the essence if it was related to a person, or how it was crafted, or malleablated, whatever the word is there. So the idea that you could just take this essence and almost inject it, like, you know, like Nas on a car or something like that, and make it more potent is an interesting idea. Like, what about the essence in the mythical Audra stone just gives it a boost rather than a new entire enchantment in the first place? So a lot of interesting questions that can come out of that. Certainly probably not questions that Obsidian really cared to answer, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I'm not taking a jab at Obsidian. I think they were like, we wanted to introduce mythic tier weapons and armor, so we created this resource that lets you do it, and we came up with this kind of, you know, I don't think they thought that far down the line of what this means, which personally, that's good. I think that leaving these kind of things as they are, not having to explain every tiny little detail, is important in world building, because it lets people like me and other people who, you know, sit at their computer and don't go outside to touch grass, that come up with those things themselves. So that's the mythical Audra stone. That is the unique crafting resource that comes out of these releases of DLC. There's also 4 unique trinkets that you can get from each boss. One is the mandibles from a spider empress. Another one is the droppings of a mountainous ooze. The second last is a grimoire of Sigil Master Aaronic, and the core of a Hellfire Ironclad Giant. These are the 4 megabosses that you can defeat. Now we're going to start off with the first one, the Crystal Empress Belranga. Now, this is where I'm going to start diving into something else that I find very interesting and funny about this particular set of DLCs, is that it brings forth a new faction that exists within this world that, much like the Obsidian Order, is one that we never actually interact with or see or probably will ever talk to, and was kind of created in a tongue-in-cheek way. For those wondering who the Obsidian Order is, if you are a person who backed either of these games in their, like, Kickstarter phase, you know, their funding campaign phase, you got to have a unique piece of armor, I believe, like a cape, that signified that you were part of the Obsidian Order. And this is not a faction that you ever actually engage with in game. Although if you're like me and you're into tabletop role playing, maybe you can find a way to introduce them in, or maybe all of your player characters are from the Obsidian Order. Regardless, there is this other faction that is introduced with these megabosses called the Deadfire Visitors Preservation Society. And we don't know anything about them other than, one, they exist, and two, that they create these little pamphlets to try to keep tourists essentially alive. And it was kind of funny because when you stop and think about it, there are actually groups that kind of exist to do these things, right? Maybe not to the same scope as the Deadfire Preservation Society, but there are definitely groups of individuals in other countries that have tourists that get into trouble quite often because they don't understand the dangers or perils that exists in their homeland. And so there are literally entire groups of people in tourist industries that are dedicating themselves simply to stop tourists from getting themselves or other people hurt because of their ignorance or something like that. And that's both hilarious and kind of sad at the same time, but also understandable when you think about it. You're traveling to one place or another, and it's easy to forget that there are dangers in other places that you hadn't thought of. Like, why would you think of them? You've only grown up in one area, you've only had one way of looking at things. I can understand how it'd be easy to forget that the world is a dangerous place and that there are different dangers in different places. And when you're on vacation, too, of all things, there's this sort of like carefree attitude that a person can adopt. So I get it. But anyways, back to the lore here. The Deadfire Preservation Society, for each one of these megabosses, they have put out a little pamphlet that talks about the pitfalls of the Deadfire and talks about each one of these megabosses. So, for example, with Belrongra, the Crystal Empress, who is a giant crystal spider megaboss, there is a pamphlet you can find in the game that says, "This traveler's guide is circulated for the benefit of newcomers to the Deadfire Archipelago." And then one passage stands out within this pamphlet saying, "Avoid at all costs the spider Belronga. She is a menace to the Isles, a poison-dripping terror of legendary proportions. Her ravenous young swarm unwary travelers, and her rage is nigh unimaginable. If a single broodling is harmed, seek her out at your own peril. The Deadfire Preservation Society takes no responsibility for harm inflicted by knowing ignorance of the risks, and every effort made has to keep any traveler away from the following coordinates." And then it gives you a list of coordinates. At that point, it's then marked on your map, and you can go and beat up this giant spider. Or, in my case, get horribly mauled and eaten by the giant crystal spider. So, it is a pamphlet that is warning tourists to stay away from certain areas because there are these giant megabosses, which of course signal you, the player, to go there and defeat these megabosses. And I love these little pamphlets for the humor that is injected in them, because they have this literally all caps, "avoid at all costs," "ravenous," "nigh imaginable," "at your own peril." Like, everything is dramatized to 11. Rightfully so, because these megabosses are incredibly formidable and people that go there will die. And then the paragraph after talks about, the Deadfire Visitors Preservation Society, the DVPS, if you will, take no responsibility for harm inflicted by knowing ignorance of the risks. So, it kind of absolves themselves of any legal stuff, I guess, if such a litigation could exist within this world. I don't know. And I find it funny that this society would even exist, not just because you're warning visitors, but you're going to these lengths to stop people from going to these megabosses that are very much a danger in their own selves, right? It's not like you're warning tourists, don't feed the bears, because then the bears will get used to humans and then we have to either relocate them or put them down in some cases because they pose a threat to the people who actually live in the area, right? So it's if you're going to an isolated island where only the Crystal Empress is, it's well, what does this preservation society care that much? It's not like it's causing harm to the people around, but I don't know, maybe it is. Maybe you have to think about some nobility's child that came to the Deadfire because they wanted to see the sights and sounds of this wonderful place, and then they get eaten by a giant spider, and now you have this royal family from somewhere that don't like the Deadfire, and they do everything they can to mess it up. I don't know. So there's things like that. But I just love how things are dramatized. How often do you actually get to see the words "nigh unimaginable" without it being humorous in some way, right? People don't talk like that. And I love that about these pamphlets. And it gives a little bit of an indication as to what the personality of either the one person or the groups of people that are writing these things for the DVPS, the Deadfire Visitors Preservation Society. And I love that a group of people would have gotten together to create this thing in the first place. Now, there is a theory that I have, and I'm sure other people have, that this Preservation Society is actually trying to do the opposite, which is to say, hey, don't go here, big scary thing over here, totally will kill you, wink, and then they just walk away and let your own imagination. So maybe they're trying to actually kill people here. So I don't know. I don't know which one it would be, and there's no way of telling, right? Like, there's no way of telling if this is just a bunch of Amawan people from the Huala cultures getting together and trying to get rid of these new tourists. There's no indication whether or not this is actually a group of Bereithian priests that are just doing their due diligence to warn people about it. I don't know which group of people, or like which religious fanatic, if there was one, who would actually be part of this society. I would almost be tempted to say, even something related to Woodica, because it has documentation about it, and it's got this like litigation language at the end here, like takes no responsibility for harm inflicted by knowing ignorance of the risks. It feels very like lawyery, and that is kind of the domain of Woodica, but I don't think Woodica has any sense of justice in the sense of like she cares if a tourist goes and gets themselves killed. So in my head, that kind of signals that this is actually a almost ironic sense of trying to get people killed by being litigious, in a sense. I don't know, but there you go. So that is Belronga's warning, and when you do defeat her, you do get this item, the Spider Empress's mandibles, which are described as hairy mandibles dripping with continuous trail of sticky venom. Either the glands producing this vicious substance haven't caught wind of the Empress's demise, or they are naturally expected to function after death. The venom incapacitates prey, but also taps into a secondary reservoir containing a bulging sac of dormant spider eggs. The implications of this fastened together biological system are unpleasant to consider and unforgettable to those who have witnessed it in action. So essentially, it is the set of mandibles from the Spider Empress Belronga, and it also, like, despite the fact that the spider is dead, these mandibles are still continuing to produce venom. And they also happen to just have a bunch of extra baby spider eggs attached to a sac there. And that is a concerning and odd biological system, as is pointed out here. Now, from a gaming perspective, that just justifies the gaming mechanic of this thing, is that you can summon 3 crystal eater spiderlings to come help you in battle. Well, how do you explain that in the lore? You have a couple of spider fangs, and now some spiders can just pop out of nowhere? How does that make sense? Well, there's eggs on it. There's spider eggs on it. Like, well, why would there be spider eggs on it? That doesn't make any... I feel like I'm watching an episode of Zafrank on YouTube where he's talking with his off-screen person, Jerry, about how things work or why the script is written the way it is. I love that YouTube channel. And it's like, well, how does this work? That doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't. It really doesn't make sense. And I don't know that Obsidian necessarily cares. Like, I think they're like, well, lean into it. It's fun. It's weird. And it works in battle. So that's honestly what's more important. At least that's the camp I'm in. I'm more about games should be games and games should be fun, and they should do the things that they do and not let lore get in the way. And asking the question of why are there spider egg sacs on the mandibles that got pulled off of a dead spider? How do they still work again? I don't know. But it's fun to play with, so there you go. The next one is a little more interesting from a lore perspective, not just because we're being a little hand-wavy with how things work, but there's some actual things to like kind of grab on and chew on. Not that you would necessarily want to chew on it, because we're going to be talking about the megaboss called Huana-i-Owe, otherwise known as the Voracious Mountain. This is a giant ooze megaboss. Ooze in this world is like ooze in a lot of fantasy media, where it's kind of, at least in this world it is anyways, a mishmash of other oozes, which are usually a mishmash of like decomposed trash and organic waste and other things that have somehow entered into a sentient form, very likely because it has been infused with essence that is part of this waste product, or people that have decomposed into this pile. And so it's literally a sentient pile of what would be described almost as necrotic ooze, or waste ooze, whatever you want to call it. I've done episodes on different kind of beasts and creatures that exist within this world, so if you want to learn more about oozes, you can go listen to that episode. I'm not going to dive into it too much. But you have something from the Deadfire Visitors Preservation Society about this one particular giant ooze that people call the Voracious Mountain, and is locally called Huana-i-Owe, and it is literally supposed to be, anyways, a mountain-sized pile of ooze. Now, when you go in and play it, I wouldn't, fight against it in game. I wouldn't say it's the size of a mountain. It's certainly a gargantuan ooze, but I don't think you're going to be, forming an expedition to, climb to the tippy top and take a selfie. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, it's a huge ooze. Definitely massive. So the Traveler's Guide that is put out for this says, do not dispose of sick livestock by feeding them to Huana-i-Owe. That primordial abomination has grown to the size of a mountain already, thanks to misguided pilgrims worshipping it as a god. A dire warning. Huana-i-Owe vomits forth a symbiote that injure a motionless host reproduces on a moving one. Simply avoiding the creature at all costs will prevent grave peril, infestation, and probable death. As always, the Deadfire Preservation Society takes no responsibility for harm inflicted by knowing ignorance of the risks and blah, 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 blah. All right, so here we have this giant mountainous ooze, and it talks about, and this is where kind of like I could see the rationale for the Deadfire Visitors Preservation Society existing, is that you have people that have, trash, for lack of a better word, or they have something that they want to get rid of. And it isn't until this episode that I thought, what would be a useful way of dealing with trash other than, like how we do nowadays, which is put them in giant piles and just keep making a bigger pile of trash and organizing it into better piles of trash, and et cetera, et cetera. If you've ever gone to a trash dump, I guess in the world of Eora, if you have enough trash, or you have, sick livestock or things you need to get rid of, throw it in a pile of ooze. The ooze will decompose almost anything. Ooze likes it. I don't have to worry about it. Everyone wins. Thing is when the oozes do that, they get bigger. They get bigger, just like our trash piles do. And now you have this mountainous ooze, and it is sentient, and it is always hungry. You have this thing that doesn't really feel or think in a very, conscious kind of way. It just is hungry. That's what it does. It has come to life by being fed organic things, and it will continue to live life by feeding on organic things. And so you have these, not only do you have locals that are probably feeding this thing, but then you also have, as it says here, misguided pilgrims that are worshiping it as a god, and you probably have tourists that can come here and just throw things at a giant ooze so that you don't have to worry about it anymore, like a giant trash pile. And now this thing has become an actual grave concern. Thankfully, it is isolated in a particular region or area of the Deadfire Archipelago, but it is still a huge problem that this thing is around. And can you imagine what happens if an ooze ever got out of control big, where it could continue to just grow and grow and grow unimpeded? Like, would that be the closest thing to, a civilization-ending threat in the world of Eora, amongst a whole host of other things that you've encountered throughout these games? But yeah, so again, a lot of capital letters on this abomination that is growing because of misguided pilgrims, and how it'll kill you and how it'll decompose you if you fight it. Now, one of the fun things I learned from actually reading up on the Voracious Mountain is a thing called the Mountainous Ooze droppings. All right, so this is the unique item that you get from the Mountainous Ooze when you're done fighting it. And this is a trinket that you get for killing this thing, and it grants you this thing called Merge, which does something interesting in combat. It merges you with a target ally or something like that, but regardless of the game mechanics of how it works, what is this actual item in the first place? And so when you actually go and you read on this item, the Mountainous Ooze dropping, it is described as such: when a group of oozes gathers into one distinct entity, their metabolism sublimates the undigestible bones, dirt, and debris of their travels into a slimy byproduct that is reminiscent of a pearl. These items tend to dissolve with the death of their host, but in rare cases they can be recovered whole and put on display as trophies. In even rarer cases, an ooze pearl will absorb some latent quality of their host, allowing those who carry such objects to manifest some objectively horrifying talents. So the thing I like about this is, one, it doesn't even try to explain how it does the merge thing in combat, of how you're merging yourself with an ally and you're taking yourself at a it doesn't even say that. It just says that you can have some horrifying talents by having one of these. But it talks about the idea of what happens to stuff that is indigestible by groups of oozes. So a group of oozes will gather together into one distinct entity. Their metabolism sublimates and the indigestible bones, dirt, and debris of their travels. And there is a byproduct from that, right? So this is essentially the poop of the oozes, the stuff that can't be digested by its biological self and is therefore produced as waste. So this is ooze poop, is these pearlescent things, and it is bones, dirt, and debris that has been attempted to be digested and dissolved by these oozes but cannot. It says apparently these things will tend to dissolve with the death of their host. So there is apparently something different about oozes in terms of them trying to digest something versus the rest of their acidic body, if you will. Because when the ooze dies, this stuff will kind of go into what I guess would be the rest of the ooze, and that will dissolve it. So my question is well, why didn't the ooze just move that stuff into that section of their body that would dissolve it? And I'm guessing it has something to do with the fact that even if you could dissolve it there, it wouldn't be able to be absorbed. So I guess there is some sort of biological structure to ooze that we don't understand about the oozes, but this clearly implies that there is some sort of underlying structure in there, apart from just being a giant pile of mostly digested stuff, if you will. But I've never thought about the idea of ooze poop before. It's just oozes in fantasy have always been these things that just digest everything. Doesn't matter what goes in there. Eventually, it will be broken down and turned into more of the ooze. That's just always what it's been. But there is this idea that there must be some things that are not digestible. And in, classic, Dungeons and Dragons, I think that you just see those things floating inside the ooze for the rest of time, right? Like they just remain there indigested. But I suppose those are more jellies than oozes. This is also Obsidian's take on it for the World of Eora. So now we have lore confirmed fact here of ooze poop existing, and that it is rare to find, and that it looks like a pearl, and people go and get it, and they use it as trophies in some aspects, and that you can even get special ooze poop that give you, as they describe here, objectively horrifying talents. And I could understand why that might be, because if you have oozes that are digesting a whole bunch of stuff, and a lot of that stuff might have essence or enchantments in it, as it is kind of breaking these things down, these all this different essence and all this different enchantments and magical whatchamajigget is kind of melding together, if you will, right? So like in any one of these droppings could be a mishmash of different enchantments that were on different things in the past. And now it's like, well, what are you getting when you pull out the latent energy that is in one of these droppings, right? Like what kind of special talent can you extract from it? And it might be a mixture of some things. It might be a random hodgepodge. Who knows? And so the fact that it just says here that you can manifest some objectively horrifying talent, I think is a pretty accurate and fun, evocative way to write that. And it also kind of like brings some ideas to mind on like, could this almost be like a random button or like wild magic, if you will, where you just like, you pull this thing out, you clutch it real hard and you let the essence flow through you and boom, you, I don't know, turn into a chicken or something like that. Who knows, right? Next up is Sigil Master Aronic. Now, this is a person who is sentient on their own right. So they're not just a horrifying creature. They are actually basically an archmage, for lack of a better word. This is a person who has grown in arcane power to the point that they are a megaboss, which is crazy because we don't know a ton about her. We know that she has deadly obelisks where she resides, but we don't know like what kind of things she's necessarily researching. We do get her unique grimoire, which are described as the pages of this grimoire resemble a collection of abused palimpsests, which is a word I had to look up, and it means something reused or altered but still bearing visible traces of its earlier form, but have abused palimpsests scrawled with so many layers of overlapping writing that the result is barely legible. Closer scrutiny reveals how the intersection of arcane runes form a coherent pattern, unlocking a deeper layer of meaning woven among the text. Wizards hoping to reproduce a coherent spell from these pages are in for a surprise, as their arcane intentions knit together with unpredictable results. So this is a grimoire, which I won't talk about at length what a grimoire is, but it's got a bunch of different spells woven within it. And it's cool how they describe this, how there's literally these interwoven lengths of text where you have, one set of text in this book, and then they have other sets of text which are kind of crossing over other things of text, but those texts interweave and create new runes, and you can't necessarily read everything at once. You have to kind of like almost find it within the texts or like within the indentations. I'm not entirely sure. I get the imagery that they're going for, and it's fascinating to think about. It also comes with this ability called Arcane Calamity, which targets someone for 3 random effects. A very chaotic thing to do, probably made by Tane or something like that. But anyway, so that is the grimoire and some of the stuff that it can does. As far as the Sigil Master herself goes, the Deadfire Preservation Society just says, Sigil Master Ironic is on the loose. She was sentenced for planting deadly sigils in a populated area and effected her escape with nothing more than a stone game piece and an inkwell. Trust in the authorities and make no attempt to apprehend her. She will have flanked herself in sigils power enough to explode unwary visitors on the spot. The Deadfire Preservation Society takes no responsibility for harm and blah, 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 blah. And so, we don't learn anything about her, which frustrates me because she's very clearly a person of massive arcane talent, could be doing great research. Maybe she's not. Maybe she just likes making sigils and she's great at it. She drew stuff in the ground, found out she can make magic from it. Now she's gone crazy with power and blows people up. And she apparently escaped prison with just having a stone game piece and an inkwell at her disposal, which is crazy. So I'm guessing she uses the stone game piece to dip into the inkwell, and she used that to draw sigils, which she then blew up the wall. If she can make sigils that explode very unwary visitors, then of course she can blow up the prison if she's just got enough ink to make a sigil. But it's crazy. So this is Sigil Master Ironic, and it brings forth an interesting question of what is the power of sigils in this world and what makes them happen, right? I'm like many out there, I like to ask the question of how do things work within these fantasy worlds? And so how do sigils work? If you draw an icon on the ground, does it just work because of the shape it is, or do you have to infuse it with essence? Do you have to chant something? Do you have to sacrifice a creature's essence? Do you have to, what do you have to do that turns a regular symbol on the ground into a powerful symbol? You know what I'm saying? Those are interesting questions, and I don't even have an answer for it. I don't know. I know that there is spells within the game where you're laying runic traps on the ground, but again, that is you're placing Audra on the ground. If this person had simply just a stone game piece and an inkwell, and she was able to theoretically, and I'm kind of drawing implications here, but theoretically break out of prison by drawing sigils and infusing it with magic or essence, how is she doing that? I don't know. Are you able to draw runic symbols in this world that nearby essence is attracted to? Right? Are there certain shapes or symbols that essence can get attracted to? Is there ways to do that? I don't know. Maybe there is. And what would that imply about the world? I also don't know. But I'm getting a lot of a consistent pattern here with these 4 megabosses, is that they had a really cool gameable thing in mind, and they did not care. Again, not in a negative way, but they did not think it was a priority to explain it in deep detail how it might work. And I'm happy for that, because then that means I can come up with stuff like that and bring it to my tabletop games. The last one is the Hellfire Colossus. Dorudugan. Dorudugan. Dorudugan, maybe. I don't know how it's spelled. But anyways, this is a giant colossus. It is called the Hellfire Colossus. This is a vessel or a construct. It's a giant man made of armor. There's not actually a man in there, but it is infused with enough essence that it kind of has, a programming to it, if you will. It has a basic function. It is alive in the sense that it can animate itself, but it doesn't think or feel, at least as far as we know. The Deadfire Visitors Preservation Society says, Animancers visiting from afar do not seek out Dorudugan, the Iron Tyrant. For academic research, death will surely follow. Whoever created this fire-spitting behemoth is responsible for a calamitous inferno that it has wrought on the Isles. The Society is unaware if the Ironclad's creator died at its hands, but justice itself would demand that they be vaporized by the very flames they so recklessly stoked. So this is a giant if you will, animancy experiment. Animancy is the science of the soul in this world, because the soul exists, essence exists, and so science exists around essence itself, and that's animancy. One thing that animancers have tried to do is to infuse mundane things like armor with essence to make it animated, and then program it to do basic things like protect this area, go defeat that thing. It's so like very basic programming, if you will, and using the energy that essence is just kind of latently filled with to actually make these things operate and do that. And when you play Pillars of Eternity 1, you actually get some really fun specific quests with the Crucible Knights where you actually get to explore some of this. And so the megaboss here, the Hellfire Colossus, is supposed to be, theoretically anyways, one such creation. It is a gigantic, another gargantuan boss that is infused with essence, and it is constantly on fire, and it basically just destroys anyone who goes near it. And so it is implied that it was created by an individual, as a lot of these vessels or constructs have to be. They don't just naturally occur in the world. That isn't necessarily true. There are situations that could, of course, make it, well, not, again, natural. I guess it would be more of a happenstance creation. But regardless, so this was clearly created by someone who's very, very powerful, or just reckless with whatever they had. There is Luminous Adra, and now we know Mythical Adra in Deadfire Archipelago, so maybe there was just a lot more power in the experimentation that goes on in the Deadfire, and something like the Hellfire Colossus could even be made. And the Deadfire Visitors Preservation Society has to actually put out a pamphlet warning animancers not to go and check this thing out, which is it's just a hard thing to do, because these are academics from other lands who want to see this, marvel in front of them, right? Like, as far as animancy, the science goes, like, this is quite the achievement that you can create such a thing of this power and ferocity. Like, that's a very impressive thing within their scientific field. And if you are a person who is trying to be in the the leading cutting edge of animancy, you're going to want to check this thing out. But the Visitor Preservation Society is like, you can do that, but then you won't be alive anymore to do any more research, because this thing will destroy you. The item that you get from this is Hellfire Ironclad's core. And just for funsies, I actually haven't read this yet. I read the other ones ahead of time in research for this episode, but I thought, I didn't know anything about all of this stuff before I started diving into it. So this one, I am learning with you, dear listeners. This is an item that you get for defeating the Hellfire Colossus, and the description reads, "This copper device once conducted a tidal wave of soul energy through the body of a Hellfire Ironclad, and seems to recall its purpose even in quote-unquote death. When harnessed, the core galvanizes the wielder's soul and heightens its potency for a time. This process of refinement and vigoration must seem ordinary under a construct's frame, but when applied to a kith body, the results are less predictable. Once the flow of essence runs dry, the core lets loose with a dramatic display of heat dispersal, burning off the excess energy in a wide radius. This grants to you the enchantment of Charge Core, which makes you, I guess, unstable, it says, for 12 seconds, increases your power level by 2 for 12 seconds, damages foes nearby for a pretty decent chunk of damage. So this one's interesting in that it actually does have some lore explaining what's going on with it, right? So if you are using this core in damage, it kind of explodes outward and does fire damage to people that are within a certain range of you. It also makes you unstable and more powerful for a little while. But the lore here talks about how this device once conducted a tidal wave of soul energy through a body of a Hellfire Ironclad, which is the Hellfire Colossus that we were talking about. So this thing basically has just an immense amount of soul energy in it. Now, it doesn't necessarily say what it is, although you can, for defeating this creature, for lack of a better word, you do get living iron and a bunch of copper wire as a result from it. So there's something about living iron and copper wire that allows this thing to hold a tidal wave of energy. And perhaps it has something to do with creating a loop. When you look at an image of it, it looks like there's almost like a stick or a loop of heated iron with bands of copper around it. I don't know if maybe you can create this loop of constantly running essence instead of just a holding cell for essence. So perhaps that is like the charging effect here. You're almost making essence into electricity at this point in time. And so when this thing is implanted into the giant Hellfire, it's just a normal battery that makes it animated so that it can do the thing it does. When you give it to a Kith person and a Kith person tries to transmit that energy into their body, it has dramatic effects and random effects, that are less predictable as a result. And that's, I think, well explained by the lore of this item. So I don't know, it doesn't really follow suit with the other items where it doesn't explain the lore. So that's my theory on how that thing might work. I don't know, maybe I'll have something better to think about for the next episode, but that'll do for now. So this episode went way longer than I thought it was going to go for. I have things to do today, so I don't have a lot of time to close out, but we're going to close out the episode.
If you find your trail has run cold, come to me with whatever you have. There is much I may be able to do for you.
Thanks, everybody, for listening to today's episode. If you liked it, let me know, worldofeora@gmail.com, or if you have questions, comments, or anything like that, just send me an email, get a conversation going. Love talking about that stuff. If you want to support the show, you can do so at ko-fi.com/worldofeora, where you can directly support the show, and it will go towards anything that comes up where I need to keep the computer on, or the microphone, or the software, or what have you. If you do want to support the show, but you don't want to do so through Ko-fi, you can do so by just engaging with the platform you're on, engaging with the polls on Spotify, leaving a comment on Spotify, and I think there's one of you out there, Jonathan, you are commenting all the time, and I very much appreciate it. I look forward to reading what you say about each episode, and I'm looking forward to uploading this episode and seeing what you said about the last one. And so, I genuinely appreciate it, and it does help, for those of you who do that, it does help the algorithm, I guess, for lack of a better word. Not that I like feeding algorithms, but it helps other people get recommended this stuff if they would enjoy it. And so that helps if you engage on that platform, leaving a rating or a review or whatever it is that you can do on the platform that you're listening to this on. As for what I have been playing, I have not been playing a ton of video games, partly because it's just a busy season. I'm very tired. Literally, when I go and I put my toddler to bed, there is a period of time where I put him down to bed and I sit there with him for a little bit. I don't know, it's just part of the routine. I just sit with him after reading a book and we turn the lights on, tuck him in kind of thing. There's been a couple of times where I've literally laid down there next to him because, he's 4, he likes to snuggle, and I've fallen asleep instantly. I have just it's crazy how tired I am, but whatever. It's, I love being busy at work, and it's just the kind of personality I have. But regardless, I haven't been playing games as much. Weirdly, though, there is one game I have played which came out on Game Pass called Motor Slice, which I don't even know how to describe what Motor Slice is. It was shadow dropped on Game Pass. I'm like, sure, whatever, I'll play it. And it's not even, if you ask me objectively, is it a great game? I would say, well, probably not. But it's fun, and I like playing it, so I continue to play it, and I might even beat the damn thing. I don't know how to describe it. It is this, you're playing this girl who is in this mega structure, and you're hunting down motors, which are essentially what appear to be self-animating pieces of machinery, I guess, but you're not really told why or how or anything like that. Everything is super minimalistic and low poly. But it's fun, and a lot of it is parkour based, of just trying to traverse the area, and then the combat is interesting but very quick. I don't know why I'm enjoying it as much as I am, but I am. It's fun, so I'm going to keep playing it. So whatever, and that's what I've been playing. I've been also doing a lot of writing for tabletop game stuff. At this point, I've identified the big 4 or 5, but the big 4 games that I'm really into reading and doing writing for, and I'm very active on Discord for, is Cairn, no surprise there, Eco Mofos. The copy paste Discord is my home online at this point in time. As well, there's an upcoming game called Torqueborg, and I'm very looking forward to that. That'll be my first foray into the Borg-like RPGs, in a very serious way, where I'm actually looking forward to playing it. I think Borg's games are really cool, and there's a lot that excite me in a lot of different ways, but Torqueborg, I'm very much looking forward to seeing how that game will run and how I can run it for my table and the ideas that can come out of it. And I kind of want to gamify the city that I live in. And the last one is Grok, which is going to have a 2E release, a second edition. Now, when I say Grok, I am not talking about the AI on X.com or Twitter or whatever you want to call it. Not talking about that AI, which apparently called itself Mecha Hitler at one point in time. Screw that. I am not talking about that. It is a game that has been called Grok before that AI was even conceived of as an idea, or at least that we know of. And the term grok, if you're into fiction or fantasy, not fantasy, but if you're into RPGs or you're into literature or fiction, you might understand that grok is a word that has been used to describe fully understanding a thing. Like, do you grok it? And if you grok it, you fully understand it. And so grok, G-R-O-K, is the name of this game that's based off of this word that has been important in RPG communities and whatnot, and that is a game I absolutely love. It is weird science fantasy, gonzo science fantasy technically, even though I don't think anyone knows what that means. I don't even know if it has a technical meaning, but regardless, that one I'm very excited for the Kickstarter to release later this month. I'm definitely going to be backing that, definitely going to be playing. I'm actually really hopeful that I can run a game for that tonight about an angry tree who wants to get the players to go and find it a friend in the form of a talking potted plant. But in order to do that, you have to chase down a invulnerable construct to a field of jagged rocks, which actually heal you if you cut yourself on them. It's weird, but I love it. I love this grok RPG, and so going to be playing that. And the last one would, as a bonus, would be Shadow Dark, but I'm not going to talk about that for now. That's what I've been playing. What have you been playing? What have you been into lately? Send me an email, worldofeora@gmail.com. Thanks, everybody, for listening to this random harebrained out of the woods episode, and I hope you liked it. I'm your host, Eric, a.k.a. Gingerino, and I'll see you guys next time.